Just one day post-election, the U.S. Supreme Court is hearing a major LGBTQ rights case. Joining us now is Jimmy Hoover, Supreme Court reporter at Law 360, to break it all down. Jimmy, thank you so much for joining us. So what is at the heart of this case that was heard?
Yeah, what's at the heart of the case that was heard this morning by the Supreme Court is whether the city of Philadelphia violated the First Amendment when it cut ties with a Catholic foster care agency over its policy of refusing to place children with same-sex couples. It has a policy of excluding LGBTQ individuals from the screening process because of its obviously views about traditional marriage. And the Supreme Court heard the Catholic foster care agency's appeal to essentially force the city of Philadelphia to allow it to continue its policy. The foster care agency receives millions of dollars from the city. It has been in operation in the city of Philadelphia for over 200 years, and it says that the city was motivated by kind of a anti-Catholic bias and animus in cutting ties after a news story reported on its stated policy of excluding LGBTQ same-sex couples from its pool of foster parents. So it could potentially be a pretty big First Amendment case. And as you say, it was heard just a day after the presidential election, and as President Trump is obviously inserting the Supreme Court into the center of that.
Yeah, in this case, now justices are being asked to overturn a ruling that's been controversial for religious conservatives since it was made 30 years ago. It is Employment Division versus Smith. So can you explain what this ruling means and how it plays a role in this particular case that's being heard now?
Sure, that's right. The Catholic Foster Care Agency in this case is asking the Supreme Court to revisit this 1990 ruling, which has become pretty unpopular among conservatives and especially religious groups in recent years, for making it essentially harder for these groups to challenge state or municipal laws in court. What the Employment Division versus Smith ruling holds is that religious groups, for the most part, cannot challenge laws that burden their religious freedom so long as that they are neutral and generally applicable. And the Catholic Foster Care Agency in this case says that strays from the kind of original meaning and spirit of the First Amendment's free exercise clause, which it says should kind of protect a little bit more in terms of the ability to practice religion and strike down those laws that burden that religious exercise. It was interesting at arguments today. The issue didn't come up that much until it was raised by the newest justice on the court, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, obviously President Trump's third appointee to the court. She seemed to be really grappling with this question of what to do about Employment Division versus Smith, whether the court should keep that decision on the books and still rule for the Catholic Foster Care Agency in this case, or simply get rid of it and replace it with a much more scrutinizing standard for certain laws that religious groups claim infringe on their religious beliefs. You know, this happens to be in the case of LGBTQ discrimination in the foster care system in Philadelphia, but there are a number of other ways in which this issue could come up, the idea of religious groups kind of claiming exemptions from these generally applicable laws.
I'm so glad that you mentioned Justice Coney Barrett. This is the first major hearing to come before her. So how do you think a conservative court might impact this ruling, but also future rulings that are concerning religion?
Well, I think it really underscored the point that the new median justice on the court is no longer Chief Justice John Roberts, but instead Justice Brett Kavanaugh, perhaps. Chief Justice Roberts seemed to be the only Republican appointee on the court to ask kind of probing questions of the Catholic Foster Care Agency in this case, saying that, you know, does it make a difference that this is essentially a government contractor that's contracting with the city of Philadelphia, and that the city is simply trying to kind of enforce its interest in, you know, prohibiting LGBTQ discrimination in its among its government contractors. Now, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, on the other hand, seemed to suggest that the city of Philadelphia was anything but neutral in its treatment of the Catholic Foster Care Agency here by cutting ties, and said that it was essentially looking for a fight. And pointed out the fact that there are, around 30 other foster care agencies that would be happy to work with gay couples in the city of Philadelphia. And this kind of reminds me of the position that Justice Anthony Kennedy took in the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, where he said that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission in that case was not very fair to the Christian baker who had obviously refused service to the same-sex couple. So, while that would count in favor of the foster care agency, it could suggest that Justice Kavanaugh is looking for maybe a more narrower ground to decide the case in the agency's favor. So instead of making a big splash in First Amendment law, which is perhaps what Justice Barrett is interested in doing, Justice Kavanaugh could simply say the city of Philadelphia wasn't tolerant enough of the foster care agency's religious views.
Jimmy Hoover, Supreme Court reporter at Law 360. Thank you so much for joining us.